Now, some of our residents have felt that we should not accept federal money as our federal government's already so desperately in debt, and they didn't want to have Westchester be a part of adding additional debt onto our future generations. Some of our residents have said that building bike paths or accepting federal money was somehow aiding and abetting a United Nations Agenda 21 program. Frankly, the fact that the federal government has already provided or allocated those funds to OKI means the horse is out of that barn as far as it being spent. With respect to whether or not the United Nations is trying to control what happens in Westchester, frankly, this is just a bike path. It has nothing to do with the United Nations. And as I said in previous meetings, things like bike paths and sidewalks have been built around the world by communities for over 4,000 years. They're going to continue to be built long after everybody's forgotten what happened to the United Nations. And I can assure you on the part of this particular trustee, my decision will not be based on anything the United Nations is doing or thinking of doing. Some of the federal gasoline taxes that each of us pays comes back to our state. One of the ways it comes back to our state is it goes to, some of it goes to the Ohio Department of Transportation, and it helps maintain our interstate highway system. Some of it comes to organizations like OKI, which stands for the Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana Council of Governments. Each of us communities in our particular area has a spokesperson who votes on that with respect to what projects OKI should take on, what they should fund, how they should approach the projects they're considered in. I was the spokesperson last year. Mr. Lang is the spokesperson this year for our community on OKI. OKI, for example, was a conduit by which we received, the county engineer received federal funds to widen Tylersville Road, also to widen Bypass 4. In spite of the fact that that I don't particularly agree with, say, some of the disagreements of people with respect to funding here, I do have to say that applying for an OKI grant funding does have some issues which weren't raised at the time. One of them is the fact that if we use grant funding, this project could be delayed at least 1 year, if not 2. It's quite possibly wouldn't be built till July of 2015. So if we want to build a bike path and want to do it expeditiously so people can start enjoying it, maybe federal grant money is not the way to go for that reason. It delays the project. Additionally, selecting or accepting federal money brings in the constraints of the federal government. It gives us another layer of mandates that we believe could add perhaps as much as another 15% to the cost of the project. And just as somebody who likes to save money, that is not, I think, a plus for the project, for this type of funding for this project. That doesn't mean that I would say no to all federal funding projects. There are times when it seems to make sense. I'm not sure that it does at this time. In summary, the past years have shown that we cannot, as a township, rely on either state or federal funding for our general revenues or to fund our services. We have to be very careful that we never build anything we cannot maintain ourselves. We cannot build anything for which we would rely on state or federal funding to maintain it. As long as I've been a trustee, which is about 20 years, Westchester always has and must continue to strive to be financially self-sufficient. We've limited our size of government. We are constantly seeking ways to reorganize, to improve, to rethink, to reconstruct the services we provide to our taxpayers and to our residents. We have developed sustainable financial structures to ensure that those services that we provide, whether it's our roads, our emergency services, our senior van transportation service, our park amenities, our concert series, to make sure that they can exist on their own, that we aren't relying on some outside funding, that our funding is coming right here locally. Because we can't trust that funding coming from the state or the federal government would be there next year, much less next decade. From my perspective, the negatives of federal funding for the Smith Road connector clearly outweigh the positives. And therefore, I recommend, frankly, we don't apply for this grant.